I'm Chris Jones, your host. Welcome to the Art and Business of Writing podcast. Hey gang, welcome back to the Art and Business of Writing podcast. I am your host, Chris Jones. Today I have with me Mark Minard. Mark is a husband, a father of 5, and he's the owner and founder of Dreamshine, which proudly serves individuals with special needs. He's also the owner and host of Elevating Beyond podcast. He's the best-selling author of The Story of You, Transforming Adversity into Adventure, Taking Your Dreams to the Next Level, and Beyond. He's an ordinary dude with an extraordinary faith, believing all things are possible. Mark, welcome to the Art and Business of Writing.
Thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here today with you and your awesome listeners, my man.
Absolutely. So, hey, look, tell me something. How do you find time to do all these amazing things with a wife and 5 children?
It's funny. Pre-show, we were just talking about the wonderful things of having kids and also the hard times that can bring on time too. And you know, it's funny, Chris, one of the number one excuses I get from people when they find out that I have a book is they always tell me, I've been wanting to write a book, but you don't understand my situation. I don't have the time. And I'm like, well, I kind of do, because I have 5 kids and I had our newborn, who's now going to be 2, but he was just being born at the time I wrote my book. I own a company that has 17 team members and 45 clients with special needs. I'm married and we have now 5 kids. We had the 5th one coming at the time, and started hosting my podcast, Elevating Beyond. And then they kind of shut up real quickly, like, oh crap, I thought I had a lot on my plate. I guess I don't have and really what it is I always break it down to seasons of sacrifice versus like really getting yourself out of thinking that there's ever going to be that perfect balance in life. And what it really comes down to is managing the tensions in each area of your life ongoing. So sometimes I might have to spend more time on my marriage, or I might have to spend more time like when you have a newborn, that's going to take more time. There are seasons where I have to put more time into my company. But again, these things, it's always about communication. And especially if you're married with a family and stuff, like I'll tell my wife, like, look, for these months, like I'm going to be working these extra hours, but there's going to be an end to it. And I'll even communicate it with my kids, like age appropriate, how they'll understand it. So that stops, because when I used to not have that communication, it would lead to more fighting at home. But then the other thing is, like, you have to have money to pay for your family too. So if you're all with your family and not working hard on your dream, then you can't pay to feed your kids. So it's like you have to balance. Like, there's no perfect balance, but you have to focus on each thing accordingly. And sometimes what it really comes down to is, what are you willing to give up? And for me, when I made the decision to write my book, it was after my good man, actually, Eric Thomas, came out and spoke at my company, Dreamshine. And I had the honor of just kind of like going back and forth and texting him and getting a little bit of mentoring, and really decided I was going to go forward with it. And I was like, okay, by the end of 2015, I'm going to have my book 100% done. So I made a commitment that year that it took getting up at like 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. almost every day, 5 days a week, and working on my book in the morning for like those few hours that I could, ongoing for a whole year. And I'm not actually like naturally a morning person, but I knew I had no time. I had to create the time. So we also had our newborn coming right around that time, and he was born, and there was nights where I wasn't sleeping, but I had to stay on that commitment of, I'm going to have it done by this deadline, or else it was never going to happen. And I knew, and another thing that helps too is to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and to know it's a season. So it's not going to be forever, like this was for like a 9-month stretch. Because a lot of people, they try to just like think the time's going to magically occur, and it doesn't. Like it's really comes down to what are you willing to give up? And, you have to look at the 24 hours, like literally, that you have in each day, and what are you willing to give up for this season of that grind that you really need to work on for your dream or to write your book. And that's how I did it in my case.
I love that because you speak so much truth. Because yeah, it is a sacrifice. It does require making adjustments and changes. Something I've been doing with another writer friend of mine recently has been tracking my time. So for the last 3 weeks, I've been examining basically how I'm spending my time, and I'm seeing that I have more time available to me than I actually originally believed.
That's right.
When I'm sitting there examining where all my time goes, I'm like, wow, I don't work as much as I think I do, and I don't waste as much time as I think I do. So now I'm in the process of really reallocating all of my time, and it feels amazing to know that I can actually be more purposeful with my time.
Yeah, and it also comes to not even like how much time, but also how like laser focused you are
Yes.
during that time, because you can block out 2 hours to say I'm going to work on writing and spend half that time like fiddling around on Facebook, social media, and really not getting any writing done, and then doing 20 minutes worth, so you didn't really do 2 hours worth. You know what I mean? So what it takes, like for me with my book, was like literally shutting my phone off, because I knew if I had it on, like I'm not disciplined enough to not look at the little blinking lights and the distractions, like whatever it takes, and I knew if I try to do it in the evening, that I'd have to be jumping back and forth with the kids, and I had to try to do it when everyone else was asleep. I knew I had to help my wife because she wasn't sleeping either. So I had to just, and then I have my company that I'm running. I had the podcast. So it was like in my situation. And as you mentioned, having someone else that helps hold you accountable is another huge component. I'm glad you brought that up, Chris. I did publicly announce it to like 5 people in my life, that those people are like, when I tell them something, like I don't tell them something unless I know it's going to happen. One of them was Eric Thomas. I was like, I'm going to have my book done by the end of 2015. And I was able to have it done like 3 months early, actually.
Did Eric text you and ask you about
He wasn't following up
it?
with me as much as like because of his busyness, as much as the other people that are like in my group and in my mastermind and stuff. But the fact that I told him that out loud, like, made my own kind of personal standard that I really want my fruits to speak, like my actions to follow my words up. So I was able to actually meet him at an event, and it was pretty cool. He was selling signed copies of his book, but instead of buying his book, I actually gave him a copy of my book, and he's like, Mark, will you please autograph it for me? So it was cool. Like when he had been in my company a year before, I was like getting an autographed copy of his book from him. Now a year later, he was asking for my autograph. So it was like, that was like the actions speak louder than words right there. That was actually like a really special moment for me too.
Oh yeah, definitely kind of that arrival point, because you're giving it to Eric, and I also saw that you've also done the same thing with Gary Vee.
Yeah. You know how he always talks about how he hates to read?
Yes.
Well, it was funny because my book it shares my whole story, but I also included like my own little stick figure drawings and stuff throughout it, just to kind of change the game up on like different leadership books. I just thought I would change it up. It adds some more variety and flavor to it. So I showed Gary Vee that. I'm like, I know you hate to read, but check it out. My book has stick figures in it. Even you'll like that. And he was cracking up. I'm like, do you mind if we get a picture? And it was funny. It was his book signing too.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
again, like, he was like, yeah, man. And he's like, that's all he said. He's like, I love it. And took a picture of me with my book and stuff. So yeah, that was cool.
No,
He was a good dude.
that's fantastic, man. Now, with regard to your book, why did you feel the need to write your book? Like, walk us through.
Sure. There's a few different levels of it. One of them is I've actually always wanted to write since I was probably like 20 years old. I remember telling my dad I wanted to be an author. And I started writing a little bit in college, like even like different lyrics and stuff, and almost like some short stories. But I didn't end up really pursuing it, and I did pursue my company Dreamshine, which is a whole other story that's in the book. But we serve individuals with special needs, and 10 years getting into that, I realized like, wow, everything we're doing with our company, I love it. I have 17 people on my team. We're serving 45 clients. And I realized like I had learned so much about like building a business from the ground up, because we set it up as for profit, because I knew if we were bankrupt, I wouldn't be able to help anyone. So I have to literally run this like a company, and had to learn about running a team, everything about all that with leadership. And I just started learning the more and more through like the ways I screwed up, then learned to do it right, that I found all these other business owners starting to like approach me at different functions or seminars and stuff that own like Fortune 500 companies. And they were like, I heard you mention how you got your team to do this. Like, how are you doing that? And I'm like, wow, like if they're asking me questions after like the third person, I'm like, I guess I have something to start telling people that like I thought everyone knew. So it also became too in my company Dreamshine. I wanted to really, I kind of call it levels of your why. Like my why started with changing lives, helping individuals with special needs. And that always is my why for what we do here at Dreamshine. But also I realize everyone on my team, they all have families and stuff too. And I wanted to continue to find out ways to bring in other streams of income to Dreamshine, because the way we bill, I don't want to bore everyone, it's like through insurance and all that fun stuff, but there's kind of flat rates that we have. And I'm like, I want to be able to pay everyone else way more than anyone has possibly done. And people are like, well, Mark, that's impossible. You're going to have to wait for the funding to change and all this stuff. I'm like, no, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I love podcasts. I'm going to start a podcast and write a book and start speaking, which sounded like insanity kind of in the field that I'm in, because no one had ever really done that. But I really believed in it. And also it made me start thinking about like going back to me wanting to share my whole story, not only of leadership, but I have my story of when I was 17 years old in jail and how I overcame all that adversity. And I hadn't really openly talked about that before. And all these things kind of started coming together. And I do talk about God in my story. Like I don't preach down people's throats, but I always just say God is orchestrating. And so, and I've had atheists read my book, and they loved it because it's just like raw and real. But kind of all those things together started really like pulling at me more and more. And I was like, okay, now it's time. And once I let all those people know and took accountability, I just continued to move forward with it. And I almost left the jail part out of it, because in all honesty, I was scared of what people were going to think about me. And I'm so thankful I didn't, because that's like what's been resonating with so many people on so many levels too.
Oh yeah, it's all about that make your mess your message kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Tasha, she's been on my podcast a couple of times. She says, God gives us the vision. If God gives us the vision, He'll give us the provision. He gives you this, He gives you the vision. He'll give you the tools to succeed, and it looks like that's what's happening with you.
That's right. Like transparency becomes like your superpower.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's what I've realized more and more. And I realize actually kind of at the core of everything that I write and speak about is really about fear and doubt. And it's because I've dealt with it my whole life, like on such an accelerated level, and I understand it. And so I can relate to people, but also I've come up with how you can overcome it in different ways and not let it defeat you. And I realize the more raw and real I am, and all these other like significantly successful people I've met through my show and everything, when they really open up, they go through the same battles and fears like all of us, but people don't open up about it enough. I realize that's not helping people. Like, it gives people hope to be like, wow, you go through the same thing that I go through in your own way. So, and you've been able to overcome it, so I can too.
Right.
And that's really like at the core of my story overall as a whole, to story of you, because like I'm sharing my journey, but it's really made for the reader to really help them take their dream to the next level and beyond.
Right. You talked about the whole idea of just resonating. Because for me, when I think about the guys like Tony Robbins or Gary Vee or Eric Thomas, those guys all have their from the bottom stories, sleeping in a bathtub or working in a wine cellar or, being homeless and no high school education. And then you see them now and it's like, yeah, I can do it. I see Mark Minard doing his thing coming from a low position. I can do it. So, I mean, I love the title. I love the bold, in-your-face kind of story of you. I love the yellow. What you've done was really cool, though. Something I do want to hit is that, you got Dan Miller, Dan Miller, New York
That's
Times
right.
best-selling author of the 48 Days to the Work You Love. How did you get a New York Times best-selling author to pen your foreword?
Oh man, I wish I could say I was like genius enough that I had some plan that made it all happen, but there was so much God involved in that. It's pretty. I actually just had Dan Miller's son on my podcast yesterday, which is funny too. But he happened when I started writing my book. I actually literally had never heard of Dan Miller. I was connected with Dave Ramsey and Dave Ramsey's team a lot through his Entre leadership program. And it just so happened as I was starting my podcast, one of my guests, Aaron Walker, I think you've ran into him. If not, you probably will. 'Cause I feel like he's been on like 15,000 podcast episodes. But he connected me with Dan Miller, and they were good friends. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. His story sounds perfect for Elevating Beyond. So I had Dan booked as a guest, and then Dan sent me his book before he was going to be on my show, a signed copy. And I read his book, 48 Days to the Work You Love, and I loved it. Then I found out more about him, and I actually ended up joining his mastermind group. I run my own mastermind too as well. But as I connected with him more and more, that was when I was like 5 months into my journey of writing my book. So as we got closer to completing it, like I started running more stuff by him and just like had the honor of him being able to read it all and write the foreword to it. It just like, it's talking it over, like it's like almost unbelievable how it all just has come together. It's crazy.
Oh, I can imagine it's surreal, like to have someone of his caliber say, "Yeah, of course, I'll write your foreword for you." It's like, "Oh, really? You'll do it, really?"
Yeah. And then he didn't just do like a generic, like he really took his time, went through the whole book, and I mean, it was really mind blowing. And I remember I was at the podcast movement in Chicago and met John Lee Dumas for the first time, and actually was talking to him about my book. And I was like, hey, would you mind, I was giving him a copy anyway, but I'm like, would you mind taking a look at it and us getting a picture together? And he looked at it, because when you're promoting something, you want to make sure it's something you believe in.
Right.
And he started looking at it, and then he's like, ooh, forward by Dan Miller? He's like, 100% yes, you got it, man.
Oh, that sounds
like,
just like JLD, man.
Yeah, he was like, I have so much respect for Dan. He was like, I don't have a doubt that this isn't, he wouldn't have written a forward to anything that's not solid, and I'm proud to represent it. And I was just like, wow. I told Dan that story. I'm like, man, you got a lot of respect out there, my man.
No doubt. So any advice for our listeners who may want to get, someone of clout to write a foreword in their book?
Yeah, my best advice is don't start dwelling on that. Just first, like, focus on the steps of what needs to be done that's in front of you. Because, like, had I been overthinking all those parts of the process, I would have got paralyzed and not ever finished my book. And the thing is, and I didn't even know like half the stuff about publish. I literally learned and ran into a lot of that on the way. Now, one of the best pieces of advice I can give is having a podcast has been a huge game changer for me, and that's like it's the like for all the listeners that it helps is so powerful, but also all the different guests that I've made real connections with them. And these are a lot of people that I honestly probably wouldn't have ever connected with if I didn't have a show that charge like an unbelievable amount for their services. And a lot of them have become like friends now through having a podcast. So that's been a huge component there. Like that's literally how I connected with Dan, who wrote the foreword to mine. But I do want to stress, like, don't get obsessed on those details. Like, focus on getting your actual book done and then start taking the next steps. And it's not all about like if you have the perfect forward by the flashiest author, you know. I mean, it truly comes down to if you're writing something that has good content that's going to help people too. But, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to people. The worst they'll say is no, then move on. Or
Right.
ask again respectfully after a
Right.
couple of weeks or something.
No, I love that you made that point. You know, not about getting the flashiest author, but really about providing the best content, because that's what it is. If you've got something of value you're putting out there, then the right person is going to back it. The person who is supposed to back your book will completely stand up for it.
That's 100% true. Because I mean, to be honest, like without mentioning the name of a book, there's some books I've got that had 20 people like doing a like collaborative forward that were all like prestigious people, and in the book like was just like it wasn't anything special at all, and the content was like a huge letdown, and it was almost like so shiny and overpromised. So again, it comes down to just focus on the content that you're writing and, you know, the people that it's going to help. And that's what it's all about, is serving people. And I really believe the more you serve people, like the finances and everything else, the people, the connections will continue to follow as you just keep doing it one day, one step at a time.
And that's just it, because no one's going to believe in your work more than you are. You know, no one's going to promote it harder than you will, and no one's going to, you know, pour into it more than you will. So, you know, make sure that your content is good. Make sure that you've got a good message and something that, like Mark Minard is doing, something that resonates with people, that's going to give them something to think about.
That's absolutely right. That's so true. And it's all about, you know, who you're going to help through your message. So if you just keep not obsessing about what if I do this wrong, what if I, and just focus on, well, it's not about me, it's about the people that it's going to help, you know. Because from having your book you talked about too, Chris, it's, I mean, it's a lot. Like it's an emotional roller coaster. In a lot of ways you're being really vulnerable, so it does take a lot of courage. I commend anyone that's moving forward with writing a book or has written a book.
Oh, totally. Now, with your book, there's something you got in there that I absolutely love. It was on your website, actually. It says, "You're not buying a book, you're purchasing a ticket to the adventure of your life." How did you come up with such a cool catchphrase?
Yeah, thank you. I just continued to like the way the cover came out and all this. Like I just continued to think of it more as an adventure. And I even have like this little set I have with the book and pictures, and I have like a little treasure chest that I carry it in. And it has like fake rubies and a treasure map. But that's really the way that I look at it too. Is life and everything is in a book. It's like reading is one of the things that literally began to change my life. And it was actually the first book I read was after jail. Wasn't even it was Stephen King's Pet Cemetery, but what it did is it opened my mind up to start really opening up my imagination. And then that led me to reading more, reading personal development books and all this other stuff. But that's really what I say it's all about, is like you're not just purchasing a book. It's literally takes you on the adventure of your life. And if you really have the courage, you know, regardless of your feelings, if you're willing to face your fears and go after your dream, you really can start living that adventure and going after whatever that treasure is that God continues to put in your heart.
Yes, of course, absolutely. Now, with putting together a book, always comes the question of, well, how do I organize my ideas? How do I create the theme around it? How did you do that with your book? How did you decide on, how you were going to stack your chapters together and how you were going to walk readers from beginning to end?
That's a great question. And something else I learned along the way, because what I did is I had tons of notes and some audio clips, and then even I used Evernote a lot on my iPhone, and I was like constantly typing quotes and stuff in there that I would just think of while I was jogging or whatever it may be. And what I learned was I ended up working with an editor who did more than just like editing punctuation and stuff. Like I did like an 8-month contract with them where I would send them a certain amount of pages each month, and they would help go through them, and then also help, like at first I sent them everything, audio clips, all of it, and they literally went through it, and they helped. They're like, Mark, this is awesome, but you have like 10 books here. let's They're like, let's focus on one, you can worry about the other 9 later. And so they really helped ask me the questions that I needed to be asked, and it helped like get me on that, okay, but where do you want this to go? Because I like wanted to put everything in it. And so that was like worth its investment to me. And plus I was paying a monthly fee to them. So it's like, I knew if I didn't have my 20 pages to them each month, like the only one losing out was me. That was another thing, honestly, that helped keep me accountable. But it just, and that was I didn't pick them immediately. Like I worked with them over some time and got to know them, developed a relationship, and realized, okay, I'm going to go forward with this. But that was a huge investment there. If you can find a good editor or someone that you can really talk in depth about what they can do for you, if they're willing to take a combination of scattered notes, audio clips, and they helped guide me down that direction. And then we made some changes ongoing, but that was like game changer for me. Like if it was all on me to do it, like I would probably still be talking about wanting to write a book or 10 books that would be like 15,000 pages and probably not make sense. So that helps.
No, totally. Now you're, published by Morgan James Publishing, my good buddy David Hancock down there. Love those guys. Tell me, what was it like to go through the process of selecting a publisher for your book?
It was like, everything else I was figuring out. Should I self-publish? Should I publish? And again, I didn't had that pre-planned before I wrote my book, because I didn't want to get paralyzed on all those details. And I just started weighing out both options, and I submitted my manuscript to them, and I was like really like pleasantly surprised they accepted it. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And I had seen some of the other work that they had done, and I just really got a good feeling like in my gut that it was a good decision to make. They've helped get me in Barnes and Nobles, and it's really helped. But I've known people that have self-published too and had a lot of success with that. But one thing I knew for sure was no matter what, if you go with a publisher or self-publish, it's still going to be a lot on you to market your book. I know a lot of people that have released some of the best books that no one ever heard about, even with a publisher, and they're like, well, I thought the publisher was going to do all the work of marketing it. And I'm like, no, I don't ever assume that. It's going to be, again, like you said before, Chris, like no one's going to believe in your product as much as you. So it's different if you've had like 10 New York Times bestsellers and everyone's heard of you. But when you're new and starting out, you're going to have to be willing to put that grind to really help get it out there along with the publisher, and just realize that's part of the adventure. But my experience with Morgan James, it's been great. I mean, it's definitely been a learning experience, and it's just been a little over 2 months now since my book was released. I think the hardest part was waiting like a year for it to actually launch from when it was done and in my hands, because I was like, second I had the actual real book in my hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to get this out there. And they set the launch date with the bookstores like 9 months back. So that was just personally one of the hardest things for me, because I guess I'm just impatient.
Dude, I think that happens to the best of us. All of us
Yeah.
get that way. It's like, man, I just want this thing to get done, get done, get done. And it's funny because, I've heard it said that writing is just 5% of the work. The other 95%, marketing, promotion, PR.
That's so true. That's so true. Actually, David sent me a quote that said, if writing a book is like having a baby, it's your baby. He's like, marketing it is like raising a child.
Yes,
And
exactly. And
I'm
you
like,
know how
man,
that
that
goes.
nails it.
It's like 9 months versus 18 years. So you're looking at that.
It's so true. And one thing, as Dan Miller told me, he gave me some great advice. Is he's like, don't just focus on the short-term gratification of being a New York Times bestseller and all that. He's like, if you are, that's great. But he's like, every time I write a book, I'm thinking of how's it going to be doing not 6 months from now, but 10 years from now.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah. And is it still going to be helping change lives and selling consistently? He's like, so many people get short-sighted, like, oh, it didn't hit the New York. He's like, I know. He said he knows some New York Times bestsellers that were bankrupt a few years later. And he's like, plus, another great person told me always look at it like a game of chess versus a game of checkers. And don't just think that you only have like one move off your book. Like, think of the bigger picture of what else am I building off of this, and where's all this leading me to? Because I've known other people that one guy was a doctor. He quit his job being a doctor, and he said he just thought I'd write a book and that would make me rich and I could retire and that would be it. And he's like, then I realized, oh crap, I have to do a lot more stuff besides like write a book. And it took writing several and like building other companies off of it and speaking and just how are you going to really use that to leverage your platform helps to just keep that in mind.
Oh, it does. We're not getting rich off of books, but
And
it's
yeah,
it's the possibility of the book. What can this book be? Like you were saying, can the book get me into public speaking? Can the book be an entree into earning new business? Can the book create coaching programs? What can the book do besides just being a visual tool for reading and learning? Can I give more? Can I get more quality out of it? Can I give more from it?
and it's helped get me into a whole other upper level of paid speaking events as a speaker from having a book. And a lot of the stuff, the content of what I'm sharing, a lot of it's from my 10 years of running Dreamshine, my company I built over a 10-year period. But having the book is like what's been opening the door. The book and the podcast have helped a
Yes.
lot, but really having a book is like getting so many. Like, I have one agent I work with, they won't even work with someone if you're not an author. So it's like that alone has been a game changer right there, especially if you're wanting to do more with speaking and stuff.
Totally. Now I heard, I was with Katie Humphrey. She released a book several months back, but she said something really, really cool to me, and I want to share it with you and kind of rehash it because I think it's really important for people to know as they begin to write their books or kind of get into the thick of it with maybe an incorrect mindset. He said that she once heard that there's no New York Times list for best writing authors, just the best selling authors. You have to get out there and promote. You have to make it happen.
That's 100% true. And that applies to really everything to do with success. Like, I realized the same things apply to my podcast, to my book, to my speaking that apply to when I started my company, Dreamshine. Like, you have to go out there. You have to do the hard work. It's not about having the flashiest, perfect website, or you can have all that stuff. That's great. But if no one's looking at it, it doesn't matter. Like, you've got to be willing. Like, I carry about 50 copies in my trunk of my book with me, like literally everywhere I go. And like, nowhere will you ever see me and someone be like, hey, do you happen to have a copy of your book? And me not have access to it within like 2 minutes. So
No, but
you
that's
have
that's
to.
great though. No, you absolutely do. Now, when it comes to promotion, what tools do you use like for online promoting? Because I see that you do a ton of online promoting. You've got videos, you've got memes, you've got all kinds of cool stuff. Do you use any tools like WordSwag or anything like that to publish and promote content?
I do, and that's a great question. And I love giving out information like this because a lot of this is free. But like, the first thing I ever started with was WordSwag. When I first got on social media, like 2 years ago, actually, opened up Twitter account for the first time and everything. And actually, I started writing my own quotes and word swag and like adding pictures and everything. And I would pay attention to which ones were getting more traction. And that also kind of helped lead me as to what content to write even more about. So like word swag is a huge, and I still use it. Excuse me, I still use it all the time. Like for all my stuff you see today, I've learned to use a combination of a couple of other apps with word swag where I can like get pretty tricky, but most of them, like word swag, there's another one called Litho Shop. But most of them are free. If not, they're like $2.99 or something. And I've done like 90% of that stuff from my iPhone. The other thing that I've used tons is you see the videos on Facebook. And just over the past 3 months, like I have three main videos that have got over 1.8 million views now combined. And I've done a lot of it through the Facebook targeting, and I just like did trial and error. I try sampling $5 here, $10 there, but I have it down to like a science now. And I just learned like you can target the right way through your page, not just people who like your page, but like specific groups. So like I'll target people who like Dan Miller's 48 Days to the Work You Love is, for example. So my book will pop up on their stream, and then they'll say, "Oh, he wrote the foreword. Dan Miller wrote the foreword," and it like so you're really able to target it to the people that would be like so much in your direct audience, and also it automatically uploads through there to Instagram if you choose it to for any video that's a minute or less. And and that's free. There's no extra charge for that, I found out. And I've had people contact me and they're like, dude, I'm seeing your stuff all over Instagram. And I'm like, what? Really? I didn't even know that was up there still. And whether you have 2 followers or 50,000, it doesn't matter when it automatically pops it up there through the targeting. And so my stuff through Instagram, those videos have got like hundreds of thousands of views too. And then it has a purchase now button like connected right to it, so my book pops right up. It's just a click away on Amazon. And I mean that's like really an affordable way to do it too. Like you can run different campaigns for like 25, $50 or something for a month, as opposed to how much it would cost to do like a radio or podcast commercial or on TV or something is so much more. Like think how much it would cost to do a TV ad that would get you 1.7 million views, and how much they wouldn't be like as targeted as all of mine have been. But it's just been a combination of all those things, just really getting out there and look at what's working for other people and study kind of how they're doing it and start like doing that in your own way.
Right. And then think about TV is that it doesn't have a one-click option. You can't just click
That's
your television,
right.
you know? So, but most people are scanning their social media through their smartphones, so all they're doing is just tapping a thumb on it or tapping a finger on it, and now they've got your book in hand. So it's very fast, very intuitive.
That's so true. And make your content, stuff again, like stuff that isn't just like a total ad for your stuff. Like make it something that you would enjoy watching or something that inspires you or motivates you. Like all my quotes are linked to my book and stuff, but I always do those for things like to help inspire people. So I don't feel like I'm like throwing a commercial down people's throat. I feel like even with ads, it's like inspiring and adding value to people.
Yeah, yeah. So what does Gary Vee call it? The 19-year-old dude clothes? Hey, buy my book. You ever see that video?
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it.
Oh, man. So what other self-promotion tips can you offer to our writers?
Well, let me think if there's something else that I did before I even had a web page for my own like Mark Minard one, or a blog page. I started using the free write it like through LinkedIn Pulse. I started writing my blogs, and it cost me nothing. And I started getting a lot of traction there too. And also that was another way for me to be able to see like, ooh, like more people are viewing this one versus this one. And then I realized like okay, so I can focus on some of that content on my book versus this one. And now what I've been doing is, since I have my own blog page now, after I write a blog, I still will literally just like cut and paste that blog into my LinkedIn post too. So it's getting looked at both platforms. And then I've gone through all my old blogs on there and added a picture of my book, The Story of You, and made a clickable link. Like, if you like this, now the story of you, and I wrote like the date that it's out and stuff. And I mean, all that stuff's still out there and it's being viewed, and it costs nothing to go back in and just add a link. And I've had a lot of people purchase through things like that. So you just have to keep like looking at what's working for other people, and just, you don't have to do these crazy expensive $20,000 MLM click funnels like it is when you're starting off. There's so many different resources out there, like literally with just an iPhone, that you can do.
Oh man, the iPhone is ridiculous. Just the stuff you can do with it to promote. But I love your point. Just, do what works. You have to do what works for you. If being on Snapchat works for you and is your target, then do it. If it doesn't, shift gears and move to Instagram. You have to stay where your people are. Because I've seen people fall into that trap so much, where they do so much social and they waste a lot of time in places where their audience really isn't, when they can be targeting, like you're saying, targeting their audience, being very direct, very specific.
Yeah. I mean, because there's a new thing coming out every month. So like, and also people have told me, well, if you can't post this on everything for LinkedIn has to be business. I'm like, no, it doesn't. The same thing that I just posted on this platform, actually, I just literally posted on LinkedIn, and tons of people liked it. So just keep looking at what works for you. At the beginning, I had all my focus on Twitter. I have like 30,000 people following me there. Then I realized the power of video on Facebook Live and all that, and I've been putting a lot more attention in that lately. So, and I've been getting tons of traction there, So, but I didn't just do it because like, oh, Gary Vee said this was cool or something. Like, I really tested it myself and was seeing what's working and what's not, and where you're getting more traction. But yeah, don't feel like you have to like literally always be doing the newest cutting edge thing, because that might not apply to you.
Right on the money. That's exactly right. Now, you have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, sure. It's Elevating Beyond, and this December we'll be hitting 2 years now. Have just done about 127 episodes, and that's just been an amazing platform. Crossed over, I think, 500,000 downloads on iTunes last month. And it's just been resonating with so many people. And really what the core of it is I always like to share the unbelievable story behind the story. So like, I've had guests, whether they're like NFL players or like Dan Miller, New York Times bestselling authors, or just the person next door that's doing anything significantly successful, but they really go into the core of sharing their story of adversity, battling fear, and overcoming to get to where they are now. And that's what that's like the core of my message, and that's the core of like what the podcast is all about. And it's meant to help give people hope, because so many people have put these successful people on a pedestal and thought, well, I can't own a Fortune 500 company. I don't have what that guy has, and the more you really unravel their whole story behind the story of how they got there, it makes all of us learn, like, wow, they're a lot like you and I. Like, literally anything's possible.
Yeah, no, that's the cool thing about podcasting, is it puts you feel like you're in the room with that person, listening in a private conversation, and it brings them down to your level. And I love that part.
I agree. I think a podcast is a huge people, again, like a game of chess. Like, that's another huge part of your overall brand, and a great tool to use to, like, I foresaw that before my book coming out, and I'm like, this will be a great way to help get my name out there more. And just, no one's heard of me yet. Like, my company's been doing well for 10 years, but I haven't been involved on social media and everything. So I love what a podcast can do, and I love the variety of shows like yours. And I also like how all of us, that are in it for the right reasons, we all really try to help each other. I feel like it's a lot of givers that are doing the right thing,
Yes,
and they
yes.
like to share each other's content and stuff. And I think that's a really cool thing to see.
It is. For those listening, podcast, it seems scary, but it really isn't as bad as you think it is. It's no different than having a conversation at Starbucks with your friend, really. That's what I've kind of
It's
found it to
true.
be. But even if you don't want to do the interview format, you can also, read excerpts from your book if you're a fiction author, even a nonfiction author, but you can share your work through your podcast and get an audience that way. There's so many ways to do it. There's no one size fits all. Everyone has a different style. Everyone does it differently, and everyone does it well.
And it's when I did my first episode, I had no idea. I didn't even have a microphone. I had terrible audio. I was using like my headphones through my phone. It didn't sound good. I had no idea what I was doing, and that's like still one of my most downloaded episodes.
Wow. Yeah. But
So you
talk.
learn.
No, I want you to talk about
Go
that
ahead.
though. I want you to talk about that a little bit because I think that's one thing that paralyzes so many people. Whether it's writing a book, starting a podcast, doing video, is this whole concept of I need to be perfect. Everything has to be done just right. I can't release anything that isn't crisp and clean.
It, yeah, it's happened to all of us, and I have to push those too many of those details away because first of all, nothing will ever be perfect, and the problem is a lot of times we're looking at people, like someone like John Lee Dumas who's been doing it for a lot of years, and he's at like a 10, but we all think we have to have everything that he has now to start. But we don't realize when he started, he had no idea what he was doing. I mean, he'll be the first to tell you that. He's like I think he said he removed some of his early episodes, or he can't even stand listening to them.
That's kind of the normal thing, man. You hate listening. It's like, oh God, I said that, I did that.
But had he not ever done those, he never would have gotten started. And that's the way it goes with everything. Like people think they have to have the perfect business loan or all the resources and tools. And I mean, we talk about David and Goliath. All he had was a slingshot and a couple of rocks.
Yeah.
And everyone was telling him it's going to be impossible. And it's really like do what you can with what you have. And sometimes your disadvantages become your advantage. So maybe you don't have all the fancy equipment and stuff, but it makes you think of a way to make your podcast more creative. And from not having that actually challenges you to not only think but take action outside of the box. And before you know it, like almost me in my book, like those stick figure drawings that like challenge me to add something different that would separate me from the other people, and that kind of becomes a huge part of what separates you from everyone else. And another thing I say too is like it's okay to be terrible on the way to becoming great. So my first episode, my audio sucked. I didn't know what I was doing, but I got my first episode done, and I'll never forget, Chris, like when I saw it in iTunes. Like it was such a cool feeling, like wow, like I'm actually in iTunes.
I'm legit.
Okay. Yeah, like the audio sounds like crap and everything else sounds terrible, but I'm in there. So then you're able to do a second episode, then a third, and you just keep going and you keep adjusting along the way. Okay, how can I make this better? And and that's a lifelong journey too. But you have to start from where you are with what you have. And I also didn't even have a web page. I talked to someone else that's been waiting 2 years to launch their podcast because they didn't have the perfect web page. And I was like, dude, I have 500,000 downloads on iTunes and I didn't even have a web page till I was like 4 months in. Like, and I'm not saying my way's the only way to do it. What I'm saying is there is no one way to do anything other than
No.
to just start doing it.
Well, that's just it. And I think that when you do that, you're robbing your potential audience of a lot of great value. Stop holding back. Just do it. Get it done.
That's right.
I remember when I first started off, I was considering the podcasting. I bought the equipment, Mark. No kidding. I got it for Christmas, my microphone, everything. And I sat on it for like 5.5 months. And so I called my buddy Jason. He had just launched his podcast, Mindset Mountain. And I was like, man, this is great, man. And I love hearing your podcast. And he's like, so what's up with yours, man? He said, you've been talking about podcasts for like 5 months. Where's your podcast? And I was like, oh. I said, well, Jason, da 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 da. He's like, man, just do it, man. That's all it is. Just once you do it, it's done. Get the first episode out, and you'll roll from there. But he said, don't worry about getting things right. Because there was one time when I had a really bad episode and it was really grainy. And he said, can you hear it? And I was like, yeah, you can hear it. He said, does it add value? I was like, yeah, it adds value. He said, so what's the problem? Ship it. And I was like, gosh, yeah, exactly. You know?
Well, it's so true. And then you get that message from someone that even if it's one person, every person, that's what it's all about, and it helped add value to them. And then you realize, like, this isn't about me.
Yeah.
Like my first
Yes.
one, that's where I really shared about the jail and everything, and I had people writing me like I was in a dark place, like still writing me, and that helped me. And I'm like, man, and I think like, geez, what if I hadn't have done that? Like, what might have happened to that person, Like, and I realized, like, wow, like it's not about us. Like,
No, no, it's
we
not.
have a responsibility to start, and that's part of it, is like that fear you were saying, everyone has that fear, and that's part of having your breakthrough. But if you're not careful, or if you don't watch out for that, it will lead to paralyzation. And paralyzation is really just fear disguised as comfort, and it puts you right back into the comfort zone.
Yes.
And what people love to say is, I'm ready to do it, but I just need one more thing. But subconsciously, what they're doing is they're stopping themselves from being allowed to fail. That's really what it comes down to a lot of the time. Thing is, you can't fail if you don't quit, and you just keep, it sounds like something from a cat post or something, but it's so true though.
Yes.
It really is. Like, it's people use the word fail too much. It's called learning
Yes.
and getting better.
No, that's exactly what it is. It's so much of what it is. Just getting back up, doing it again, getting back. But that's really the essence of the story of you. You know, that's really the heart of it all. As we talk about it, it comes back to that, because when you actually do these things, when you overcome the doubts, when you talk about, well, someone's already written a book like this before, someone has a business type podcast before, but that person is not you.
That's
That
right.
person doesn't know what you know. They're not going to deliver it the way you do. They're not going to ask the questions that you're going to ask. They're not going to present the information the way that you would gather it and present it. And I think people
Yeah.
get lost in that. They get lost in what other people have done and forget how much value that they have.
Yeah, yeah, and don't try to be them. Be you. Like, we all take stuff from other people. We all take wisdom I take wisdom from everyone, and but then I apply that to me, and then I do
Yes.
that my way. Don't try to be 100% someone else and worry, why am I not doing it just like them? You shouldn't want to be them. Like, you have your own stuff to bring to the table. That's what uniquely makes you you, and you're going to have your own awesome audience. But yeah, you just gotta, that, and what I love to tell everyone, is that you versus you, like, the real battlefield takes place in your mindset, and don't allow yourself to stop you from, like, going after your dream. And it's gonna be, Chris, just like you said, like, you just have to start doing it with your podcast. Finally, you're like, all right, it's grainy, whatever, I'm gonna put it out there, and then I'm gonna move on, I'm gonna adjust accordingly, improve, and keep moving forward. And here you are now, or had you not ever put that one out there, you would still be talking about, who knows how much equipment you'd
No.
have stored in like 20 web pages and stuff.
No, it's the truth, man. It's the truth. So it's coming
That's
for a
awesome.
landing. Oh, that's great. So tell me an author that you really admire.
Oh gosh, I have quite a few. Well, I have to say Dan Miller. He did the forward for my book, of course. But truly, I mean, his book is really inspirational too. Some other ones are, especially with running a company, is Dave Ramsey's Entre Leadership. A lot of people think of him just on the financial end, but his book Entre Leadership really is a game changer. And it was the first time I read something where I'm like, wow, he's really talking about what it takes, like, to run a company from the ground up, starting off in your garage, or my office used to be in a barn, in a storage shed. And he relates to the pain of, like, having to fire his first team member, and like what I did, like, waited way too long for it. And I'm like, wow, he didn't have funds to meet payroll. And just, even if you're a solopreneur or anything, an author, you can relate to those different things that he talks about. So I always point people towards that book. Another one of my all-time favorites is a book called Love Does by Bob Goff. that one is just, if you haven't read that, definitely read it. I don't even want to give anything away. It's so awesome.
Sweet. Oh man, what's the best advice you've ever received with regards to either business or writing?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I could really put it down to just one thing only, but really it kind of comes to what you and I were just talking about. Like, don't get over caught up in having a perfect plan because it doesn't exist. Like, plan as much as you can and then literally like take action. That's been the best advice I've got, and in my own life, like by applying that. And that's how you become courageous and become good at something, is not over like one great moment. It's over a series of steps over time. But don't allow yourself to be paralyzed by thinking you have to have that perfect business plan. Just start doing. That's a game changer right there for me.
No, I love it, dude. You just do it. It's really all there is to do. Now,
That's right.
the book is called The Story of You. How can our listeners find the book, one, and then two, how can they connect with you?
Sure, I appreciate that. They can just, you can get it at really anywhere books are sold. That's what my publisher keeps telling me to say. I'll say I'll say like Amazon or Barnes. Like, no, Barnes and Noble doesn't like. So anywhere books are sold, just like the wonderful answer to put out there. And then also you can go to Mark Minard, MarkMinard.net. And I have my videos, my blogs, everything on there. Then it has like the direct links to purchase The Story of You. And it also has all my social media on there too, like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that. Facebook, as you know, Chris, like I'm really active on
Oh,
Facebook.
yeah.
And on everything I truly do try to interact with everyone like as much as I possibly can, because that's why we're putting ourselves out here. Like, we like to help people. So whenever someone reaches out to me, it might take me some time, but I always like try to get back to everyone.
Love it. All right, guys, thanks again for listening to The Art and Business of Writing. You have been with Mark Minard. Mark is a husband and father of five, the owner of Dreamshine, the host of the Elevating Beyond podcast, and best-selling author of The Story of You. Thanks again for joining me, Mark.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for listening. This has been a great time spending with all of you today.
All right, and we'll see you on the other side.